imagine.
Yeah, and being there in the Adirondacks, again in that like kind of foothillsy type of area, the land is not nearly as brutal. The winters aren't going to be as brutal as like in the high peaks. Even though there's so many Bigfoot encounters from in the high peaks region and a couple ranges in particular. But yeah, it just seems like it's is as ideal a spot as possible. And we're about to wrap up
Definitely.
this episode, Gunnar. So I always like to ask people a few questions, but I'm going to keep this one nice and simple for you to finish out the show. So in your experience, what in your mind makes the Adirondacks a unique place?
But yeah, that's definitely an interesting question. What makes the Adirondacks a unique place? I think what makes the Adirondacks a unique place is the amount of untouched wilderness. So, like we were talking about earlier, you know, comparing the Adirondacks to Yellowstone, for instance, you have an area that's more than 4 times bigger than the most popular and most well-known national park in the country. You have an area that's way, way larger than that, and with way less, far less visitors and inhabitants. So you have places where I think there's probably, many places in the Adirondacks where no human beings ever walked in the history of the world. There is spots there that are truly untouched wilderness that, it's kind of hard to find that in the United States. And the Adirondacks in New York State, that's where you find it. If you want untouched wilderness, you will never find another person. And you can be left alone and be in the absolute just barren landscape. That's where it is. And I think that's what makes it super unique is just how remote it can be in certain areas.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And there's already areas here in the park that I've already told my wife. I said, if the world's coming to an end, I've already got a couple spots picked out where we're going to go, and no one will ever find us. And
You will never be found.
Yeah, we'll live happily ever after, like the pioneers of old. But all right. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up this edition of the October Sessions Bigfoot in the Blue Line Part 2. You all waited an entire year for another Bigfoot episode, and this one did not disappoint. Thanks to Gunnar for coming on the show and sharing his spooky experience with us from the northern Adirondacks and the Catskills. It's a remote area with very few roads, so who knows what's lurking between those trees. But thanks for everybody for listening to the October Sessions here on the 46 of 46 podcast. More October Sessions episodes are on the way. And if you want to support the podcast, head over to 46of46.com or check out 46of46store.com and pick up a t-shirt or a hat or a sticker if you want to support the show and my costs associated with the podcast. I'd greatly appreciate it. And check back on Fridays for new mountains, new stories, new guests, and new episodes here on the 46 of 46 podcast. Remember to always leave no trace, do the rock walk, and if you carry it in, carry it out. And don't you dare wander off the trails. You never know what's watching you from behind those trees. See you on the trails, everybody.